Welcome to my channel, a lead that bring your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The fluorescent lights of the hospital's night shift buzzed like angry wasps above my head, a sound I'd grown so accustomed to that silence now felt foreign. My sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as I pushed the cleaning cart down the pediatric wing, the smell of disinfectant burning my nostrils, a scent that had become as familiar as my own skin. 3 years of this. 3 years of invisible existence, where doctors walked past me as if I were part of the furniture, where my hands scrubbed away the evidence of illness and despair, while my own life remained perpetually stained. I was 24 and felt ancient. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. when I heard it, a child crying. Not the usual whimpering of sick children, but the desperate, terrified sobbing that made my chest constrict. My feet moved before my brain caught up, following the sound to room 304. The door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the darkened hallway like liquid gold. I shouldn't have looked. Hospital policy was clear. Cleaning staff didn't interact with patients. But something about that crying pulled at the frayed edges of my maternal instinct, the part of me that had died when they took my daughter away 2 years ago. The boy couldn't have been more than 4, small and fragile against the white hospital sheets, his dark curls matted with sweat. His brown eyes were wide with fear, tears streaming down flushed cheeks. He was alone, completely alone in a private room that reeked of money, fresh flowers on the windowsill, expensive get-well cards, a tablet on the side table worth more than my monthly rent. "Hey," I whispered, abandoning my cart in the hallway. "Hey, sweetheart, it's okay." He looked at me with such desperate hope that my heart cracked clean open. "Nightmare?" I asked softly, approaching the bed with my hands visible, the way you would a frightened animal. He nodded, hiccuping, and without thinking, I sat on the edge of his bed. The mattress dipped under my weight, so much softer than the lumpy thing I slept on in my studio apartment. I reached out and smoothed his damp curls back from his forehead. His skin was warm, but not feverish. "What's your name?" "Marco," he whispered, his voice small and broken. "Marco," I repeated, and the name felt significant somehow, though I couldn't say why. "That's a strong name. I'm Elena. Are you a nurse?" "No, baby, I clean the rooms. But I'm here, okay? You're not alone." His small hand grabbed mine with surprising strength, and I felt something inside me shift. A tectonic movement of the soul. This child needed someone. Maybe not me specifically, but someone. "Where's your mama?" "I was here," I asked gently. His face crumpled. "I don't have one. She went to heaven when I was born." The words hit me like a physical blow. I knew that particular grief, the absence of a mother, though mine had simply chosen drugs over me rather than dying, different paths to the same abandonment. "And your papa? He's working. He's always working." Marco's voice carried no resentment, just resigned acceptance. "But he loves me very much. He tells me all the time." Something about the way he said it made me believe him. This child was loved, even if he was currently alone. "I'm sure he does," I murmured, continuing to stroke his hair. It was soft, recently washed with expensive shampoo that smelled like cedar and mint. "Do you want me to read you a story, just until you fall asleep?" His nod was eager, desperate. I reached for a book on the nightstand, some adventure story about pirates and treasure. My voice was rusty from disuse. I hadn't read to anyone in so long. But I began, and Marco's breathing slowly steadied, his grip on my hand loosening as sleep finally claimed him. I should have left then, should have returned to my cart, finished my shift, collected my meager paycheck, and gone home to my empty apartment. But I stayed, watching this beautiful child sleep, imagining for just a moment what it would have been like if my daughter had lived past 3 months. If I'd been given the chance to read her stories and chase away her nightmares, I must have dozed off myself, lulled by the warmth of the room and the exhaustion that lived in my bones. Because when I jerked awake, the sky beyond the window had shifted from black to deep purple, and I was no longer alone with Marco. A man stood in the doorway. No, not just a man. A presence. a force of nature condensed into human form. He filled the doorframe, despite not being extraordinarily tall, maybe 6 feet. But there was something about the way he occupied space that made the room feel smaller, the air thinner. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, tailored so precisely it looked like a second skin. No tie, the top 2 buttons of his black dress shirt undone, revealing a glimpse of olive skin and the edge of what might have been a tattoo. His dark hair was styled with casual precision, slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it, but it was his face that made my breath catch. Sharp jawline shadowed with stubble, high cheekbones, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the dim light. He couldn't have been more than 30, far too young to carry the weight I saw in those eyes. Beautiful. Devastatingly, dangerously beautiful, but it wasn't his appearance that made my heart hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was the absolute stillness with which he regarded me, a predator assessing potential threat. Behind him, I could make out the silhouettes of 2 men, broad-shouldered and watchful. Security. The kind that came with wealth and danger. His gaze moved from me to his sleeping son, then back to me. I realized with horror that I was still sitting on Marco's bed, still holding his small hand, my cleaning uniform wrinkled and my hair escaping its ponytail in messy wisps. I looked like exactly what I was, a poor hospital cleaner who had crossed an unforgivable boundary. "I'm sorry," I breathed, starting to stand. I heard him crying and he was alone and I just... "Don't." One word, spoken quietly but with such absolute command that I froze. His voice was deep, accented, Italian, I thought, and carried the kind of authority that came from people who expected obedience without question. He moved into the room with fluid grace, and I noticed everything at once. The expensive leather of his shoes, silent against the floor. The subtle scent of cologne that spoke of money and danger. The way the men behind him remained in the hallway, stationed like sentinels. He approached the bed, his eyes never leaving my face, and I felt pinned by that gaze. Unable to move, unable to breathe. "Who are you?" he asked softly, but there was steel beneath the silk. "Elena," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Elena Martinez. I work here. Cleaning staff. I'm on the night shift, and I heard Marco crying, and he was alone, and I know I shouldn't have..." "He asked you to stay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Something flickered across his face, an emotion I couldn't name. His hand reached out, and I flinched instinctively, but he only brushed his fingers against Marco's forehead with such tenderness that it made my throat tight. The contrast was staggering. This dangerous, powerful man touching his son with infinite gentleness. "He has nightmares," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "When I'm not here, the nurses, they don't comfort him. They follow protocol." The way he said protocol made it sound like a curse. "I'm sorry," I repeated uselessly. "I'll go. I won't..." "You read to him." It wasn't a question. His eyes had found the book, still open on the bed. "Yes. The pirate story. He fell asleep about an hour ago. I should have left then, but you didn't want him to wake alone." The understanding in his voice was unexpected, disarming. I nodded again, feeling tears prick at my eyes for reasons I couldn't articulate. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way this stranger seemed to see me when everyone else looked through me. "Thank you," he said, and the words sounded foreign in his mouth, as if gratitude was a language he rarely spoke. He turned to face me fully then, and the intensity of his attention was almost physical. I felt stripped bare under that gaze, as if he could see every secret I carried, every scar hidden beneath my skin. His eyes traveled over my face, my cheap uniform, the hands I'd folded in my lap to hide their trembling, and something changed in his expression. A sharpening, a focusing, like a predator catching an unexpected scent. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years. "Night shift always?" "Yes." "And you live where?" The questions felt invasive, wrong, but I found myself answering anyway. "East Side, the Riverside district." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I didn't know then that Riverside was controlled by his enemies, that my mere existence in that neighborhood had already complicated something. I didn't know anything, except that this man made me feel simultaneously terrified and seen in a way I hadn't experienced in years. You came to comfort my son, knowing you could lose your job for it. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. He was crying. He was alone. What kind of person would I be if I just walked past? Something blazed in those dark eyes. Approval, perhaps, or recognition. Most people. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things unspoken. Marco stirred slightly, his hand tightening around mine in sleep, and I saw the way his father's gaze dropped to our joined hands. The expression that crossed his face was complex, possessive, calculating, almost hungry. "What's your full name?" he asked suddenly. "Elena Rose Martinez." "Elena Rose Martinez," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "You will come back tomorrow night. It wasn't a request. I work tomorrow. I'm assigned to the 3rd floor. You will be reassigned to this wing, to this floor, to this room." Each word was precise, absolute. "You will check on Marco during your shift. You will sit with him if he cries. You will read to him. Do you understand?" My mouth went dry. "I don't think the hospital will allow what I tell them to allow. No arrogance, just fact. Marco needs someone. You have proven yourself trustworthy. You will come back." I should have refused. Should have recognized the danger in a man who could simply command a hospital to bend to his will. Should have run from the intensity in his eyes, the possessiveness already creeping into his tone when speaking about his son. And, I would later realize, about me. But I looked at Marco's sleeping face, so peaceful now, and I thought of my own lost daughter, and I heard myself say, "Okay, I'll come back." His smile was slight, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. "Good. Your shift ends at 7? 6. At 6, you will be escorted home. My driver will take you. That's not... I can take the bus. Not from this hospital. Not anymore." His tone brooked no argument. "You work until 6. You are driven home. You return tomorrow at 10 p.m. These are the terms." I opened my mouth to protest, to assert some kind of independence. But Marco chose that moment to wake. His eyes fluttered open, immediately finding his father, and his entire face lit up with joy so pure it hurt to witness. "Papa." "Ciao, tesoro mio," the man murmured, his voice softening in a way that made my heart skip. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to Marco's forehead, and I started to rise, to give them privacy, but Marco's hand tightened around mine. "Don't go, Elena. Papa, this is Elena. She made the nightmares go away." Those dark eyes met mine over his son's head, and something passed between us, a recognition, a promise, a trap closing. I didn't know which. Maybe all 3. "I know," he said softly. "She's going to come back tomorrow night, too." "Would you like that?" "Yes!" Marco's enthusiasm was infectious, innocent, and heartbreaking. Then it settled. He straightened, adjusting his cuffs in a gesture that seemed habitual. "Elena, my driver will meet you at the staff entrance at 6 a.m. He'll be in a black Mercedes. Don't keep him waiting." And just like that, my life tilted off its axis. I didn't even know his name. This beautiful, dangerous man who had just claimed ownership of my schedule, my safety, my future. I wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat, trapped by the intensity of his gaze and the weight of what I'd just agreed to. He turned to leave, his security detail materializing from the shadows, and I finally found my voice. "Wait. What's your name?" He paused in the doorway, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. Behind him, one of his men shifted uncomfortably, as if I'd committed some terrible breach of etiquette. But the man himself just smiled. A real smile this time, edged with something dark and possessive that made my skin prickle. "Dante," he said. "Dante Moretti." The name should have meant something, should have sent me running, but I was too tired, too caught up in Marco's grateful smile, too naive to understand that I'd just made a deal with the devil himself. "Good night, Elena Rose Martinez," he murmured. and the way he said my full name felt like a claim. Sleep well. You'll need your strength for tomorrow. And then he was gone, leaving only the scent of expensive cologne and the echo of his voice in the air. Marco was already drifting back to sleep, secure in the knowledge that his father had been there, that I would return. I sat there for another moment, my hand still warm from holding his, my mind racing. What had I just agreed to? Who was Dante Moretti, that he could command a hospital, that he traveled with armed security, that his very presence seemed to bend reality around him? The sun was fully risen by the time I gathered my cart and stumbled through the rest of my shift in a daze. At exactly 6 a.m., I pushed through the staff entrance and found the black Mercedes waiting, just as promised. The driver was a massive man with scarred knuckles and eyes that had seen things I probably couldn't imagine. He opened the door for me without a word. I should have walked to the bus stop, should have asserted my independence, should have recognized the cage being built around me, bar by golden bar. Instead, I slid into the leather interior, breathing in the scent of luxury and danger, and let myself be driven home through the waking city. It wasn't until I was alone in my apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, that I let myself acknowledge the truth. I was in trouble. Deep, inescapable trouble. And the worst part? Some small, broken piece of me was grateful for it. Sleep didn't come. I lay on my creaking mattress, watching shadows shift across the ceiling as my mind replayed every moment in that hospital room. Dante Moretti. The name rolled through my thoughts like distant thunder, ominous and electric. I'd grown up in the East Side, had learned early which names to fear, which territories to avoid, which men moved through the city with blood on their hands and ice in their veins. Moretti wasn't just a name, it was a legacy, a warning, and I'd just agreed to work for him. My phone buzzed on the milk crate I used as a nightstand, a number I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I opened the message. Your assignment has been changed. Pediatric wing, 3rd floor, room 304. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Your supervisor has been informed. DM. Just like that, my entire work schedule rearranged with a text message. I should have felt violated, manipulated. Instead, I felt something far more dangerous. Seen. Someone had noticed me, thought about me, made decisions that included me in their world. God, I was pathetic. I forced myself out of bed at noon, my body protesting the disrupted sleep cycle. The mirror showed a stranger, hollow-eyed, too thin, dark hair tangled around a face that had forgotten how to be young, 24 going on 40. The hot water in my building only worked sporadically, and today wasn't my lucky day. I showered in lukewarm water that smelled faintly of rust, scrubbing away the hospital smell, trying to wash away the memory of Dante's eyes on me. It didn't work. My apartment was a study in survival, rather than living. 400 square feet of peeling paint and broken promises. The window overlooked a dumpster. The refrigerator hummed ominously, containing mostly condiments and expired milk. I'd grown accustomed to hunger, to making a single meal stretch across days, to the gnawing emptiness that was as much emotional as physical. I made instant coffee and stared at my phone, at that message from DM. Dante Moretti had my number, had probably known everything about me within hours of our meeting, where I lived, where I came from, every mistake I'd ever made. Men like him didn't leave things to chance. The day crawled past. I tried to sleep more, managed maybe 2 hours of fitful rest filled with dreams of dark eyes and small hands holding mine. At 8 p.m., I dressed in my spare uniform, the one without stains, the one I saved for days when I needed to feel slightly less invisible. I braided my hair with shaking fingers, applied the bare minimum of makeup to hide the exhaustion carved into my features. The bus ride to the hospital felt surreal, like moving through water. Every passenger seemed to stare at me, as if they could see the mark Dante had left, the claim he'd already staked. I was being ridiculous, paranoid. Nobody cared about a cleaning woman heading to her night shift. But when I arrived at the staff entrance, the security guard who'd worked there for years looked at me differently. His eyes held something new, recognition tinged with wariness, maybe even respect. He waved me through without the usual cursory bag check. "Martinez," my supervisor called as I clocked in. Linda was 50-something, tired, and generally indifferent to her employees beyond ensuring shifts were covered. Tonight, she looked at me with barely concealed curiosity. "You've been reassigned." "I know. I got the message." Her eyebrows rose. "Directly? From administration?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Must be nice, having connections. The words weren't quite hostile, but they carried weight. Resentment, maybe. Suspicion, definitely. "You're on third floor pediatrics. Room 304 is your primary responsibility. Keep it spotless. The patient is VIP. "I understand. Do you?" Linda leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Because VIP here means something different than usual. It means men in suits standing in hallways. It means administration bending over backward. It means don't ask questions, don't talk to anyone about what you see, and definitely don't screw this up." My mouth went dry. "Okay. Room 304 only tonight. If the boy needs anything, you help him. If anyone asks you questions about the patient or his visitors, you know nothing. Understood?" "Yes." She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, Martinez, but be careful. Men who can rearrange hospital assignments with a phone call aren't the kind you walk away from easily." The warning settled in my stomach like a stone, cold and heavy. But I just nodded and headed to the third floor, my cart rolling ahead of me with its familiar squeak. The pediatric wing felt different tonight. 2 men in dark suits stood near the nurse's station, their eyes tracking my movement with professional disinterest. Not the same ones from this morning, but cut from the same cloth. Broad-shouldered, alert, dangerous. One spoke quietly into his wrist, and I realized he was wearing a communication device. Security for a 4-year-old boy. What kind of life was that? Room 304's door stood open, warm light spilling into the hallway like an invitation. I paused at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. Marco sat up in bed, surrounded by new toys, expensive ones. The kind advertised on commercials I couldn't afford to make real, but his face when he saw me lit up brighter than any toy could manage. "Elena, you came back." The pure joy in his voice cracked something inside me. I abandoned my cart and entered the room, letting myself smile. Really smile. For the first time in months. "Of course I did. I promised, didn't I?" He nodded enthusiastically, bouncing slightly on the mattress. "Papa said you would. He's always right about things." I sat in the chair beside his bed, maintaining proper distance this time, aware of the security outside. The camera's probably recording everything. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" "Better. The doctor said maybe 2 more days and I can go home." His enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "But Papa is worried. He keeps asking the doctors questions and making them check things again. He loves you very much." "I know." Marco's smile was soft, secure in that knowledge in a way I'd never been. "He said you were kind, that you have a good heart. He doesn't say that about most people." My pulse quickened. Dante had talked about me, had thought about me enough to form opinions, to share them with his son. The idea sent heat crawling up my neck. That's nice of him to say. "Will you read to me again?" Papa brought new books. He gestured to a stack on the nightstand. Beautiful hardcover editions that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. "Which one would you like?" We settled into a rhythm, me reading, him occasionally interrupting with questions or observations, both of us pretending this was normal. That a hospital cleaning woman and a mafia boss's son reading stories together at midnight was somehow ordinary. The security detail changed at 11. I heard the quiet exchange of information outside the door. Marco didn't even notice, so accustomed to constant surveillance that it had become invisible to him. Poor baby. What kind of childhood was this? But then he laughed at something in the story, his whole face transforming with delight. And I thought maybe he was okay. Maybe love could insulate a child even from the darkness surrounding them. At midnight exactly, I felt the shift in the air before I heard anything. Marco's face brightened impossibly further, and I knew before I turned around that Dante had arrived. He filled the doorway again, commanding attention without effort. Tonight he wore all black, suit, shirt, even his tie was dark as sin. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and the scent of his cologne mixed with something else. Gunpowder, maybe. or just my paranoid imagination. 2 different security guards flanked him, these ones even larger than before. His eyes found mine immediately, holding my gaze with an intensity that made breathing difficult. Something flickered across his face. Satisfaction. Possessiveness. Something darker I couldn't name. "Papa!" Marco's joy was infectious. Dante's expression softened as he moved into the room, his attention shifting to his son. "Ciao, tesoro. You should be sleeping." Elena was reading to me. We're almost finished with the chapter. Those dark eyes returned to me, and I felt pinned. "Is that so?" I stood quickly, smoothing my uniform with nervous hands. "I can leave you to finish the chapter." A command wrapped in courtesy. He moved to the other side of Marco's bed, lowering himself into a chair with fluid grace. "I'd like to hear it." So I read, acutely aware of Dante's presence, the way he watched me rather than the book, the intensity of his focus making my voice waver occasionally. Marco didn't notice, snuggled between us, secure in the attention of 2 adults who cared about him. When I finished the chapter, Marco's eyes were already drooping. Dante stood, leaning over to press a kiss to his son's forehead, murmuring something in Italian too soft for me to catch. Then he straightened and gestured toward the door. My heart hammered as I followed him into the hallway. The security detail shifted, creating a subtle barrier between us and the rest of the floor. Dante moved down the corridor toward a small waiting area, empty at this hour, and I trailed behind like a fish on a hook. He turned to face me in the dim waiting room, and suddenly the space felt impossibly small. Up close, I could see the faint scar along his jaw, the shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that suggested violence barely contained. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for coming back, for keeping your word. I said I would. Most people's words mean nothing." He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to retreat. "But I think yours do. You don't know me." "No." His head tilted slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle requiring solution. "But I intend to." The words should have frightened me, should have sent me running back to my cart, to my invisible existence, to safety. Instead, they sparked something in my chest, heat and terror, and a longing so profound it hurt. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why what? Why do you care? I'm nobody. Just a cleaning woman who... You comforted my son when he was alone and afraid." Dante's voice was soft but edged with steel. "You risked your job to give him what he needed. That makes you someone, Elena." The way he said my name, like a caress, like a claim, made my knees weak. "Mr. Moretti, Dante." He moved closer still, near enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "You will call me Dante. That's not... We're not... We are whatever I say we are." No arrogance, just absolute certainty. His hand rose, and I froze as his fingers brushed along my jaw, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. His touch was surprisingly gentle, at odds with everything else about him. "And I say that you matter, that you are under my protection now. Do you understand?" "No," I breathed. "I don't understand any of this." His thumb traced my lower lip, and electricity shot through my entire body. "You will. In time, you'll understand everything." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Someone like you, living in Riverside, working nights, walking home alone. It's not safe, Elena. Not anymore. I've been fine for 3 years. That was before." His voice dropped to something almost dangerous. "Before you became important to my son. Before you became important to me." My heart threatened to burst from my chest. "This is crazy. You don't even know me." "I know enough." He pulled back slightly, his hand falling away, leaving cold where warmth had been. "I know you're alone. I know you're struggling. I know you have shadows in your eyes that match the ones in mine." His gaze intensified. "And I know that when you held my son's hand, you looked at him like he mattered more than anything in the world. That kind of heart is rare, Elena. Precious." I should get back to work. My voice was barely audible. "Yes." But he didn't move, didn't release me from the weight of his attention. My driver will take you home at 6. No arguments. Dante. No. Arguments. Each word was carefully enunciated. You will accept this protection, or I will have you escorted home every night by my security. Your choice. Some choice. I nodded. Defeated. Overwhelmed. Terrified by how much I wanted to surrender to this. To him. To the promise of being seen and protected and valued. Good girl. The praise sent heat flooding through me. Inappropriate and intoxicating. Now go. Finish your shift. Take care of my son. I fled. There was no other word for it. I practically ran back to room 304, my hands shaking as I grabbed my cart. But I could feel Dante's eyes on me the entire way, tracking my movement, claiming ownership of my space and breath and future. What had I gotten myself into? The next 2 weeks dissolved into a strange, intoxicating routine that rewrote the architecture of my entire existence. Every night at 10 p.m., I arrived at the hospital to find room 304 waiting like a sanctuary I hadn't known I needed. Marco's recovery progressed steadily, the pneumonia that had hospitalized him retreating under aggressive treatment, but Dante showed no inclination to adjust our arrangement. If anything, his presence intensified. He came every night without fail, arriving between midnight and 1 a.m. with his rotating security detail, his expensive suits, and those eyes that saw too much. We developed an unspoken choreography. I would read to Marco until Dante arrived. Then the three of us would exist in this bubble of temporary domesticity that felt both desperately real and impossibly fragile. Dante never touched me again after that night in the waiting room, but his attention was a physical thing. Constant, assessing, possessive. He watched me read to Marco, watched me tuck blankets around his son with gentle hands, watched me exist in his space, breathing his air, becoming entangled in his world with every passing hour. And I let him. God help me, I let him. The black Mercedes became as familiar as my own heartbeat. Dante's driver, a man named Luca who spoke rarely but observed everything, picked me up at my apartment building at 9:30 each night and delivered me home at 6:15 each morning. The other residents noticed, whispered, stared at the luxury vehicle idling in our broken-down neighborhood like a diamond in a trash heap. I started receiving different treatment everywhere. The landlord who'd ignored my complaints about heat and hot water for 2 years suddenly appeared at my door with a repairman. The corner store owner who'd watched me count pennies for bread began refusing my money, saying my tab was handled. Even the bus drivers on my rare daytime errands nodded with new respect. Dante's shadow was remaking my world, and I was too tired, too lonely, too desperate for connection to fight it. On the 14th night, everything changed. Marco was being discharged the following morning. The room buzzed with preparations, nurses finalizing paperwork, doctors providing last instructions, Dante's people coordinating security for the transfer. I should have felt happy for Marco's recovery. Instead, I felt hollowed out, grief-stricken at the thought of losing this strange haven I'd found. "You're quiet tonight," Dante observed. We stood in our usual positions on either side of Marco's bed, the boy sleeping peacefully between us after an exciting day of packing and goodbye hugs from favorite nurses. "Just tired," I lied. His eyes narrowed. He knew. Of course he knew. This man seemed to read me like I was a book written specifically for his consumption. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. He spoke quietly to one of his security team, then gestured for me to follow. My heart hammered as we left the room, moving down the empty corridor toward the same waiting area where he'd touched my face and promised protection. The security detail remained at a discreet distance, visible but not intrusive. The waiting room was dark except for the city lights filtering through windows. Dante moved to stand before the glass, his profile sharp and beautiful against the glowing skyline. I remained near the doorway, uncertain, aware that we'd never been truly alone before. Marco had always been there, a buffer against whatever this was between us. "You think this ends tomorrow," he said without looking at me. My throat tightened. "Marco's going home. He doesn't need me anymore. And you?" He turned then, pinning me with that devastating gaze. "Do you need this to end?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't brave enough to examine. It doesn't matter what I need. This was always temporary. I'm just what? He moved closer, each step deliberate. Just the cleaning woman? Just someone who happened to be kind to my son? Just a girl from Riverside who should be grateful for 2 weeks of easy work? Yes, I whispered. Even though we both knew I was lying, he stopped inches away, so close I could see the pulse beating in his throat, could smell cedar and danger and something uniquely him. I don't believe you. Dante. These 2 weeks, Elena, every night, watching you with Marco, watching you read to him, comfort him, love him without expecting anything in return. His hand rose, fingers trailing along my cheek with devastating gentleness. Do you know what that's done to me? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel his touch burning through every defense I'd ever constructed. You walk into my son's life, into my life, and you give so freely, your time, your care, your heart. His thumb brushed my lower lip, and electricity shot straight to my core. No one has ever looked at Marco the way you do. Like he's precious beyond measure. Like his happiness matters more than your own comfort. He is precious, I managed. Any child would be lucky to have a father who loves them the way you love him. Something dark and hungry flashed in his eyes. And what about you, Elena? Who loves you the way you deserve? The question shattered something inside me. Tears burned behind my eyes, threatening to spill over and expose just how broken I really was. Nobody. There's nobody. There is now. His other hand cupped my face, holding me captive to his intensity. From the moment you chose to comfort my son instead of protecting your job, you became mine to protect, mine to care for, mine. You can't just claim people. I can. I do. No apology, no hesitation. And I'm claiming you, Elena Rose Martinez. You will not return to that apartment in Riverside. You will not walk dangerous streets alone. You will not struggle to pay rent or buy food or survive on the scraps the world throws you. My head spun. What are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow, when Marco goes home, you come with us. The words hit like a physical blow. I stumbled back, and his hands fell away, though his gaze never released me. That's insane. I can't just... Marco needs you. He's already asking if you'll visit, if you'll read to him at home, if you'll be there when he wakes from nightmares. Dante's voice was calm, rational, as if he wasn't proposing something completely irrational. And I need you there to care for him. You can hire a nanny, someone qualified, someone with references. I don't want a nanny. He stepped closer again, crowding me against the wall, his body bracketing mine without touching. I want you. The woman who sat with my son without being asked, who held his hand and chased away his fears, who looked at him like he was worthy of love. This is too much, I breathed. It's too fast, too. Tell me you don't feel it. His voice dropped to something almost dangerous. This pull between us. Tell me you haven't noticed the way I watch you. The way I ensure you're protected, the way I think about you every moment you're not in my sight. I couldn't. God help me. I couldn't lie about that. Tell me, he pressed, his breath warm against my temple, that you don't lie awake thinking about me the way I lie awake thinking about you. A small, broken sound escaped my throat. His nearness was overwhelming, heat and strength, and the promise of safety I'd never known. My hands came up instinctively, pressing against his chest, and I could feel his heart racing beneath expensive fabric and muscle. I think about you, I admitted, the words barely audible. But that doesn't mean... It means everything. His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt surrounded, consumed, utterly possessed by this man I barely knew, but who somehow understood me better than anyone ever had. Come home with us, Elena. Let me give you safety, comfort, a place where you matter. As Marco's caretaker, I needed to clarify, to establish boundaries, to protect myself from hoping for more. Something flickered in his expression. Frustration, maybe, or dark amusement. As whatever you need to be to say yes. We'll figure out the rest as we go. And when you get tired of me, when Marco doesn't need me anymore, what happens then? His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw beneath the controlled surface to the violence lurking underneath. The part of him that commanded fear and respect from dangerous men. I don't get tired of things that belong to me, Elena. I protect them, cherish them, keep them safe from a world that would destroy them. I'm not a thing to be owned. No. His hands framed my face again, gentle despite the intensity burning in his eyes. You're a woman who deserves better than what life has given you, and I'm the man who's going to provide it, whether you're ready to accept that or not. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He stepped back with visible reluctance, pulling the device from his pocket and frowning at the screen. Whatever he read there made his expression go cold, dangerous. Problem? I asked, my voice shaky. Nothing that concerns you. But the way he said it suggested otherwise. He made a quick call, speaking in rapid Italian too fast for me to follow, his free hand running through his hair in agitation. When he hung up, the tension in his shoulders had multiplied. I need to handle something, he said tersely. Luca will take you home at 6 as usual. But tomorrow night... He paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal. Tomorrow night, pack whatever matters to you. Not much, just essentials and anything with sentimental value. The rest we'll replace. Dante, I haven't agreed. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hand sliding into my hair, tilting my head back with firm possession. His eyes burned into mine, and I felt the full weight of his will pressing against my resistance. You'll agree, he said softly, with absolute certainty, because staying in that apartment, in that neighborhood, working yourself to exhaustion for barely enough to survive, that's not living, Elena. That's slowly dying, and I won't allow it. Not anymore. Not when I can give you better. Why? The question tore from somewhere deep inside. Why do you care so much about someone you barely know? His thumb stroked along my jaw, his touch at odds with the intensity of his gaze. Because when you held my son's hand and read to him like he was the most important person in the world, I saw something I thought didn't exist anymore. Genuine kindness, selfless care, a heart that gives without calculating the return. He leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing my temple. And because the moment I saw you in his room, something in me recognized something in you. Loneliness calling to loneliness. Brokenness seeking brokenness. We match, Elena, in all the ways that matter. Then he was gone, striding from the room with his security detail falling into formation around him, leaving me trembling against the wall with his words echoing in my head and his scent clinging to my skin. I returned to Marco's room in a daze. The boy slept on, unaware that his father had just turned my world inside out. I went through the motions of my shift, cleaning rooms, emptying trash, pretending everything was normal when nothing would ever be normal again. At 6 a.m., Luca waited with the Mercedes. The drive home was silent, but I caught him watching me in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. When we arrived at my building, he spoke for only the second time since I'd met him. He's a good man, Miss Martinez. Dangerous, yes, but good. Especially to those he cares about. I nodded numbly and climbed the stairs to my apartment, Dante's proposition ringing in my ears. Pack tomorrow night. Come home with us. Let me give you better. Inside my tiny studio, I stared at my meager possessions. The sagging futon, the milk crate furniture, the photograph of my daughter that was all I had left of her. This apartment had been my prison and my refuge for 3 years. Leaving it felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness, but staying felt like choosing to drown when someone was offering me air. I pulled out the single battered suitcase I owned and stared at it for a long moment. Then, with shaking hands, I began to sort through what little I had, deciding what pieces of my old life were worth carrying into whatever came next. Morning came without sleep. I sat on my futon, watching dust motes dance in the pale sunlight filtering through my grimy window, my packed suitcase a silent accusation in the corner. Everything I owned that mattered fit into one small bag, a few changes of clothes, my daughter's photograph, a necklace my grandmother gave me before she died, and the tattered copy of Jane Eyre I'd read so many times the pages were loose. Not much to show for 24 years of existence. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number, but I knew before opening it who the message was from. Marco asks about you constantly. He wants you to see his room, meet his dog, have breakfast with us. Don't disappoint him, Elena. Be ready at 9 p.m. DM. The presumption should have angered me. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through my chest, the knowledge that I'd been thought about, discussed, wanted. Marco asked for me, and Dante was giving me no room to retreat, no space to change my mind. Smart man. He knew I'd overthink this, talk myself out of it, choose familiar suffering over unknown possibility. I spent the day in a strange fugue state, moving through my apartment like a ghost haunting her own life. I cleaned obsessively, scrubbing counters that didn't matter, organizing possessions I was leaving behind. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock at my door. My landlord stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. Behind him were 2 men in work uniforms carrying toolboxes. "Miss Martinez," he started, not meeting my eyes. "I'm here to fix the heating and the hot water issue. Should have been done months ago." My apologies for the delay. I stared at him. In 2 years, he'd never apologized for anything. "It's fine. But I'm actually moving out. No rush on that," he interrupted quickly. "Your rent is paid through the end of the year, courtesy of a benefactor. And if you decide to stay, the lease is yours, as long as you want it." Dante. Of course. Ensuring I had options, even as he maneuvered me toward the one he wanted. I let the workers in, watched them repair things that would no longer be my problem, and tried to reconcile this surreal generosity with the dangerous man who'd ordered it. By 8 p.m., I was dressed in my best jeans and the only nice sweater I owned. Thrift store finds, but clean and relatively unworn. My hair hung loose around my shoulders because I had no idea what one wore to move into a mafia boss's home. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. At exactly 9 p.m., the knock came. But it wasn't Luca at my door. Dante stood in my hallway, filling the narrow space with his presence, looking impossibly out of place in his tailored black suit against my building's peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. Behind him, 2 security guards waited at the stairs, their eyes constantly scanning. "You came yourself," I breathed. His gaze traveled over me, lingering on my loose hair, the fitted sweater, before returning to my face. Something heated flickered in those dark eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't? That I'd send Luca to collect you like luggage? I don't know what to think about any of this." He stepped inside without invitation, and my tiny apartment shrank around him. I watched him take in my poverty with steady assessment, the futon with its threadbare blankets, the milk crate nightstand, the hot plate I used because the stove was broken. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble. "You've lived like this for 3 years, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It's not much, but it's mine. His eyes cut to me, sharp and intense. It's unacceptable. No one under my protection lives like this. Ever. I wasn't under your protection until 2 weeks ago. No. He moved closer, reaching out to touch a water stain on the wall, his expression darkening. But you are now. And you'll never return to this. The finality in his voice should have chafed. Instead, it felt like absolution. Permission to leave behind this half-life I'd been surviving rather than living. My suitcase is there, I said, gesturing to the corner. He picked it up with one hand, frowning at its light weight. This is everything? Everything that matters. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of just how little I'd had to hold on to. He set the suitcase down and closed the distance between us, his hands framing my face with that devastating gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. You'll have more, he promised, his voice low and fierce. More clothes, more comfort, more safety, more everything. I'll make sure of it. I don't need things, but you'll have them anyway. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I shivered, because taking care of what's mine is not negotiable, Elena, and you are mine now. The possessiveness in his tone sent heat pooling low in my belly. Dangerous and intoxicating. Dante. Come. Marco is waiting, and he's been impossible all day with excitement. He picked up my suitcase and gestured for me to precede him. I took one last look at my apartment, this place that had been my refuge and my prison, and then I walked out, pulling the door closed on that chapter of my life. The building's other residents watched from cracked doorways as Dante escorted me down the stairs, his hand at the small of my back, proprietary and protective. Mrs. Chen from 2B crossed herself. The Rodriguez brothers stared with wide eyes. Everyone recognized power when they saw it. And danger. The Mercedes waited at the curb, Luca standing at attention beside the open rear door. Dante handed him my suitcase, then helped me into the car with a hand that lingered just a moment too long on mine. He slid in beside me, and suddenly the spacious interior felt intimate, charged. As we pulled away from Riverside, I watched my old neighborhood disappear through tinted windows, the broken streetlights, the graffitied walls, the people moving through shadows because daylight offered no better prospects. I should have felt sad. Instead, I felt lighter, like shedding a skin that had never quite fit. "Where do you live?" I asked, breaking the silence. 15 minutes from the hospital. The estate has been in my family for 3 generations. He shifted, his thigh pressing against mine in the confined space. 12 bedrooms, grounds with gardens and a pool, security throughout, staff who are vetted and loyal. My head spun. That's not a home, that's a fortress. It needs to be. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing with casual possession. My world is dangerous, Elena. People would use anyone I care about to get to me. Marco especially. And now you. The weight of that settled over me. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't. Too late. His grip tightened slightly, not painful, but immovable. The moment you walked out of that apartment, you crossed a line. There's no going back to what was, only forward to what comes next. You're very sure of yourself. I have to be. He turned to face me, and the intensity in his eyes stole my breath. Uncertainty gets people killed in my world. So I decide, I act, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. You'll learn to trust that, Elena, to trust me. The car turned into a gated driveway, massive iron gates swinging open to admit us. My mouth fell open as we drove through manicured grounds lit by subtle landscape lighting. The main house rose before us like something from a movie, 3 stories of elegant stone and windows that glowed with warm light. "Oh my God," I whispered. Dante's thumb stroked the back of my hand, a small gesture of comfort. "It's just a house. You're home now." The car stopped before the main entrance where a woman in her 50s waited. Gray hair pulled into a neat bun, kind eyes, wearing what looked like an expensive version of a housekeeper's uniform. "That's Maria," Dante said, as Luca opened my door. "She manages the household staff and has been with my family since I was Marco's age. She'll help you get settled." I climbed out on shaking legs, craning my neck to take in the sheer size of the building. This was insane. I didn't belong here. I was a cleaning woman from Riverside, and this was a palace. "Elena!" Marco's voice rang out, and then he was running toward me, a small whirlwind of energy and joy. I barely had time to brace myself before he crashed into my legs, hugging me with all his 4-year-old strength. "You're here! You're really here!" I knelt down, gathering him close, and felt my heart crack open. This was why I'd agreed to this madness. For this child who looked at me like I hung the moon. "I'm here, sweetheart. I promised, didn't I? Papa said you're going to live with us now, that you'll read to me every night, and be here when I wake up and everything." His excitement was infectious, pure. "If that's okay with you," I managed around the lump in my throat. "It's the best thing ever." He grabbed my hand, tugging insistently. "Come see my room. And meet Bruno. That's my dog. And Papa had them make up the room next to mine for you, so you're close if I have nightmares." I glanced at Dante, who watched this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read, satisfaction mixed with something deeper, more complex. He nodded slightly, permission or encouragement, and I let Marco pull me into the house. The interior was breathtaking, marble floors, soaring ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime, but it was also lived in, comfortable. Toys scattered in corners, Photos on tables, the scent of something delicious cooking somewhere deeper in the house. Marco gave me the grand tour with 4-year-old enthusiasm, showing me every room on the first floor before dragging me upstairs. His bedroom was large and bright, decorated with themes of adventure and exploration, maps on the walls, a bed shaped like a ship, shelves overflowing with books and toys. "And this is your room." He pushed open a door, and I froze. The bedroom was bigger than my entire apartment had been. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, dressed in linens that looked impossibly soft. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens. A sitting area with a fireplace occupied one corner. An ensuite bathroom visible through an open door promised luxury I'd never experienced. "Do you like it?" Marco asked anxiously. "Papa said to make sure it had everything you'd need." "And look." He ran to a bookshelf I hadn't noticed, already filled with beautiful hardcover editions. "Books, so you can read whenever you want." I couldn't speak around the emotion clogging my throat. This was too much. All of it was too much. "She loves it." Dante's voice came from the doorway. I turned to find him leaning against the frame, watching me with those knowing eyes. "Don't you, Elena?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good." He pushed off the frame, moving into the room with that predatory grace. "Marco, go wash up for dinner. Elena will be there soon." The boy hugged me once more, then scampered off. I heard his feet on the stairs, leaving Dante and me alone in this beautiful room that was supposedly mine. "This is too much," I finally managed. "It's not enough." He crossed to where I stood, frozen in the middle of the room. "Nothing will ever be enough to make up for what you've survived, what you've lived without, but it's a start. I don't understand you, why you're doing this, what you want from me." His hand cupped my cheek, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. "I want you safe. I want you cared for. I want my son to have someone who loves him the way you do." He paused, his thumb brushing my lower lip. "And I want you close enough that I can figure out why the sight of you makes something in my chest tighten, why your smile feels like sunlight breaking through clouds, why the thought of you in danger makes me want to burn the world down." My breath caught. "Dante, dinner in 20 minutes. Maria laid out some clothes for you in the closet. Things that should fit until we can take you shopping properly." His hand fell away, leaving cold where there had been warmth. "Take your time. Get comfortable. This is your home now, Elena. Start believing it." He left, and I stood in the middle of that beautiful room, my old life in a suitcase by the door, and a new life stretching before me like uncharted territory. I was terrified. I was exhilarated. I was in so much trouble, and some broken part of me couldn't wait to see what came next. The first week in Dante's house passed in a blur of surreal domesticity that rewrote everything I thought I knew about myself. Marco became my constant companion. We read together, played in the gardens, built elaborate block towers that he delighted in destroying. He was starved for maternal attention, soaking up every moment I gave him like a plant finally receiving water. And Dante watched us with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. He worked from home most days, conducting business in his study, with a rotating cast of dangerous-looking men who treated him with deference bordering on fear. But he always emerged for meals, for Marco's bedtime routine, for stolen moments in hallways where his hand would brush mine or his eyes would linger just a beat too long. The staff treated me with cautious respect. Not quite family, not quite employee, something undefined that left me floating in limbo. Maria became my unlikely ally, gently teaching me the rhythms of the household, showing me which rooms were off-limits, explaining without explaining that certain doors stayed closed, and certain questions went unasked. I was living in a gilded cage, and the terrifying part was how quickly I grew comfortable with the bars. On the 8th night, everything shifted again. I just tucked Marco into bed, reading him his favorite pirate story until his eyes drooped with sleep. As I moved to leave, Dante appeared in the doorway, blocking my exit. He'd shed his suit jacket, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and marked with tattoos I'd only glimpsed before. "Walk with me," he said quietly. My heart kicked against my ribs, but I followed him through the house and out to the gardens. Night had fallen, the grounds lit by soft landscape lighting that cast everything in romantic shadow. We walked in silence down a stone path bordered by rose bushes, their scent heavy in the warm air. "You're settling in well," he observed. "Marco makes it easy. He's an amazing kid." "He is." Dante's voice carried weight, "and he's becoming attached to you, very attached." Something in his tone made me stop walking. "Is that a problem?" He turned to face me, and the moonlight carved his features into something almost otherworldly, beautiful and dangerous, and entirely focused on me. "It's a complication. I don't understand. Don't you?" He stepped closer, and I retreated until my back hit a stone wall, trapped between cold rock and his heat. "You've been here 8 days, Elena. 8 days, and my son talks about you constantly, asks for you the moment he wakes, refuses to eat unless you're at the table, falls asleep easier because you're in the next room. I thought that's what you wanted. It is." His hands braced on either side of my head, caging me in. "But it's not just Marco who's becoming attached. It's me." The confession hung between us, electric and terrifying. I could barely breathe, my entire body hyper-aware of his proximity, the scent of him, the controlled power in every line of his frame. "That's a bad idea," I whispered. "The worst." His head dipped, his breath warm against my temple. "You're everything I shouldn't want. Innocent, gentle, too good for the darkness I live in." "Then let me go." "I can't." The words were harsh, almost pained. "I've tried, Elena. These 8 days I've tried to maintain distance, to see you as just Marco's caretaker, just someone under my protection. But every time you smile at my son, every time you exist in my space looking like salvation I don't deserve, I want you more." My hands came up instinctively, pressing against his chest. I could feel his heart racing beneath my palms, as out of control as my own. "This is insane. You barely know me. I know enough." One hand left the wall to cup my face, his touch achingly gentle despite the intensity burning in his eyes. "I know you're brave, comforting a stranger's child despite the risk. I know you're kind, the way you love Marco without expectation. I know you're strong, surviving 3 years of hardship that would have broken most people. And I know—" His thumb traced my lower lip, and heat flooded through me. "That you feel this too, this pull between us. Tell me you don't." I couldn't. The lie wouldn't form, because he was right. I felt it every time he entered a room, every time his eyes found mine across the dinner table, every time his hand brushed mine in passing. This magnetic attraction that defied logic and self-preservation. "Feeling something doesn't mean we should act on it," I managed. "Why not?" His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt surrounded, consumed. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't kiss you right now, why I shouldn't take what we both want." "Because I'm scared." The admission tore from somewhere deep. "Because men like you don't want women like me beyond—" "Men like me?" His voice went sharp, dangerous. "Tell me what you think you know about men like me, Elena. Powerful. Dangerous. Used to taking what you want and discarding it when you're done." He jerked back as if I'd slapped him, his expression going cold. For a moment, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But then his jaw tightened, and he took a deliberate breath. "You're right. I am powerful. I am dangerous. And I do take what I want." His eyes bored into mine, but I don't discard things that matter to me. Ask anyone who knows me. I protect what's mine with everything I have. Fiercely, absolutely, without compromise. And that's what I am? A thing to be possessed? No. He closed the distance again, his hand sliding into my hair, tilting my head back with firm possession. "You're the woman who made my son smile for the first time since his last hospitalization. The woman who brought light into a house that's known too much darkness. The woman who looks at me like I'm a man instead of a monster, even though you're terrified of what I make you feel. I'm not. You are. I can see it in your eyes, feel it in the way you tremble when I'm close." His thumb stroked along my jaw. "But you're still here, still letting me touch you, still wanting this as much as I do." God help me. He was right. Despite everything logical screaming at me to run, to protect myself, I leaned into his touch like a flower-seeking sun. "One kiss," he murmured, his lips so close to mine I could taste the promise. "Give me one kiss, Elena. Let me show you that this isn't about possession or power. It's about wanting you so badly I can barely think straight. I should have refused. Should have maintained boundaries, protected my heart. Instead, I heard myself whisper, 'Okay.'" The word barely left my lips before his mouth claimed mine. The kiss was nothing like I'd expected, not harsh or demanding, but achingly tender. His lips moved against mine with devastating gentleness, coaxing rather than taking, asking permission with every brush and slide. One hand cradled my face while the other wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his body. I could feel the controlled strength in him, the restraint it took to kiss me softly, when I could sense the hunger beneath. My hand slid up his chest to his shoulders, fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, holding on as the world tilted and reformed around this moment. He tasted like coffee and mint and something uniquely him, addictive and dangerous. When his tongue traced the seam of my lips, I opened for him without thought, and the kiss deepened into something that stole my breath and my sense. Time lost meaning. There was only Dante's mouth on mine, his hands holding me like I was precious and breakable. The sound of our mingled breathing in the quiet garden. Heat built between us, a slow burn that promised to consume everything in its path. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine as we struggled for control. "Tell me you felt that," he demanded, his voice rough. "Tell me it wasn't just me. I felt it," I admitted, my voice shaky. "God, Dante, I felt it." His smile was triumphant and tender all at once. "Good. Because there's no going back now, Elena. You're mine. Not as a possession, but as someone I'm choosing. Someone I'm going to protect and cherish and keep safe from everything, including my own world. Your world is dangerous, which is why you'll have security whenever you leave these grounds. Why you'll never be alone in public. Why anyone who even thinks about threatening you will learn exactly why my name inspires fear." His voice carried absolute certainty. "I won't let anything touch you, amore mio. You're too important." The endearment in Italian sent warmth flooding through me. "What does that mean?" "My love." His thumb brushed my swollen lips. "It's too soon to say it in English, I know, but in Italian, I can give you truth you're not ready to hear." My heart hammered. "Dante." "Shh." He kissed me again, softer this time, briefer. "I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm just asking you to stay, to give us, a chance. Can you do that?" I looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability beneath the danger, the hope beneath the control. This man who commanded fear from others was asking, not demanding, offering himself despite the risk. "Yes," I whispered. "I'll stay." The next 3 weeks unfolded like a dream I was afraid to wake from. Dante courted me with the same intensity he brought to everything. Stolen kisses in hallways, intimate dinners after Marco went to sleep, long conversations in his study where he shared pieces of himself I suspected few people ever saw. He told me about his wife, Marco's mother, who died in childbirth due to complications the doctors couldn't prevent. About the guilt he carried for not being there, for being across the city handling business when she needed him most. About his vow to give Marco everything, to protect him from the violence and darkness that came with the Moretti name. I told him about my daughter, about the pregnancy that came too young from a man who disappeared the moment I showed, about holding my baby girl for 3 precious months before crib death stole her away, about the depression that followed, the years of barely surviving, the emptiness that had become so familiar I'd forgotten what fullness felt like. We were 2 broken people finding wholeness in each other, and it was terrifying and beautiful, and more than I'd ever hoped to have. But paradise couldn't last forever. The threat came on a Tuesday, sudden and vicious. I was in the garden with Marco, watching him chase Bruno through the rose bushes, when Dante appeared with 4 security guards, his face set in grim lines. "Inside. Now." His tone allowed no argument. I gathered Marco without question, hurrying toward the house as more guards materialized from seemingly nowhere. Once inside, Dante led us to a room I'd never seen before. Reinforced door, no windows, surveillance monitors covering one wall. "What's happening?" I asked as Marco pressed against my side, sensing the tension. "One of my enemies learned about you," Dante said flatly. "About what you mean to me, to Marco. They've made threats." My blood ran cold. "What kind of threats?" His jaw tightened. "The kind that mean you don't leave this house until I've handled it. The kind that mean additional security, restricted movement, constant vigilance. For how long?" "As long as it takes." He crouched before Marco, his voice gentling. "Hey, buddy. We're going to play a game, okay? The game is we all stay inside for a few days, spend lots of time together. Can you do that?" Marco nodded, brave despite his obvious fear. "Is someone trying to hurt us, Papa?" "No one will hurt you," Dante promised, his voice steel wrapped in silk. "Or Elena. I promise you that, Marco. You're both safe." The next 48 hours were tense. Dante disappeared for long stretches, emerging with blood on his knuckles and a darkness in his eyes that spoke of violence I was grateful not to witness. The security doubled, then tripled. I kept Marco distracted with games and stories, pretending everything was fine while my heart raced with fear. On the third day, Dante came to my room late at night. I was still awake, too wired to sleep, staring at the ceiling. He knocked softly before entering, and the exhaustion in his face made my chest ache. "Is it over?" I asked. "It's over." He crossed to the bed, sitting on the edge with a heavy sigh. "The threat has been neutralized. You're safe." I should have asked what neutralized meant. Should have demanded details. Instead, I reached for him, pulling him down beside me. He came without resistance, his head resting against my shoulder, his breath warm on my neck. I was terrified, I admitted quietly. Not for me. For Marco. For you. His arm wrapped around my waist, holding me close. "I told you I'd protect you, both of you. I keep my promises, Elena, I know." And I did. Whatever else Dante Moretti was, dangerous, ruthless, feared, he was also a man who loved his son absolutely, and had somehow extended that fierce protection to include me. We lay there in the darkness, tangled together, and I felt something shift inside me, the last wall crumbling, the final resistance fading. I was in love with him, completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love with this beautiful, dangerous man who'd claimed me as his own. "Dante?" "I love you." The words came out soft but sure. "I know it's fast, and probably crazy, but I love you." He went very still. Then he shifted, rising up on one elbow to look down at me, his eyes intense even in the dim light. "Say it again." "I love you." His kiss was fierce this time, claiming and possessive, and filled with all the emotion neither of us had words for. When he pulled back, his hand cradled my face with infinite tenderness. "Ti amo, Elena Rose Martinez." He murmured against my lips, "I love you. From the moment you sat with my son, you've owned my heart, and I'm never letting you go." 6 months later, I stood in the same garden where he'd first kissed me, wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of roses. Marco stood beside Dante as his best man, grinning so wide his face looked ready to split. Maria cried happy tears. The security detail formed a discreet perimeter, and when Dante slid the ring onto my finger and promised to love me forever, I believed him absolutely, because he'd already shown me every day what that love looked like: protection without possession, care without control, devotion that made me feel cherished rather than caged. "I'm watching our son," I whispered during our first dance, answering that question he'd asked so long ago in a hospital room. Dante's smile was brilliant, transforming his dangerous features into pure joy. "No, amore mio, we're watching him. Together. Always together." And as Marco ran over to wrap his arms around both our legs, demanding to be part of the dance, I finally understood what home meant. Not a place, but people. Not safety from the world, but security and belonging. I'd gone from invisible to essential, from surviving to thriving, from empty to overflowing, and all because a little boy had cried in the night, and I'd chosen kindness over protocol. Sometimes the best cages are the ones we walk into willingly, when they're built not from bars, but from love, and sometimes the most dangerous men make the safest havens for the hearts brave enough to trust them.